Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Economic Times virtual roundtable theme, India at 75, Leadership Unmasked, Driving Entrepreneurial Spirit. This session is powered by Kyndryl. I am Alka Kaur, welcoming you all to this session. As we emerge from the COVID-19 epidemic, the risks and opportunities for businesses are greater than ever. The epidemic disrupted supply chains, caused market instability and political uncertainty, and the staff needed guidance from the leaders more than ever to handle these problems. What leadership style best makes use of this post COVID era's opportunities? New leaders are needed for a brave new world. Those that best exemplify the entrepreneurial spirit are likely to propose at this critical juncture when hybrid work culture has taken the world by storm. Entrepreneurs thrive on identifying possibilities as well as figuring out how to get through difficult conditions. Technology is one of the most important ways for them to avoid these crises. Another driving force that set entrepreneurs apart from their business counterparts is their entrepreneurial spirit, which helps them to succeed even if the odds may be against them. One of the biggest aspects of the entrepreneurial spirit involves sharing your insights, lessons learned, and experience with those around you. This helps to inspire them to adopt your characteristics for the betterment of the company. In today's session, we will talk about fostering entrepreneurial spirit within corporate structures and ensuring creative destruction. Our eminent panelists will also throw light on how entrepreneurs can keep it alive and thriving even when things become difficult. We will also cover themes such as leadership guidance to deal with risks and opportunities for businesses, how to foster entrepreneurial spirit within corporate settings, learn entrepreneur skills to survive difficult times, emerging technologies to avoid crisis. And to take us through this interesting topic, we have a prestigious panel today. Let me now introduce the panel. We have with us today Vijay Chandok, MD, ICICI Securities, Sanjeev Navangul, MD and CEO, Bharat Serums and Vaccines, Mahesh Balasubramaniam, MD and CEO, Kotak Life Insurance, Rishi Gupta, MD and CEO, Fino Payments Bank, Lingaraju Saukar, President, Kyndryl India. And the session will be moderated by Nilesh Gandhi, Partner, PwC India. Without further ado, I now invite Nilesh to take it from here. Over to you, Nilesh.
Thank you, Alka, for the introduction. And it's my pleasure to moderate this very interesting discussion today. Very pertinent topic. So welcome to all the panelists and thank you for joining. Really look forward to a very insightful and engaging discussion. Let me first begin with Vijay. So Vijay, globally, if we really look at it, more than 85% of the companies on the Fortune 500 list 50 years back are no more on that list, right? A lot of them have even lost relevance in the entire time. So when you look at India at 75, right? In your opinion, how have the established corporates really in India fared in terms of corporate entrepreneurship?
Thank you very much, Nilesh. A very good afternoon to you. Very good afternoon to all the distinguished fellow panelists and, of course, to all the viewers who are on the other side. Thanks to ET for having me invited to today's panel. I think that's a great and a very interesting question that you asked. And let me pivot to the Indian context. And in the Indian context, I was looking at some data and I thought it would be interesting to share this insight emerging from data. I'm actually going to go back into time, 1995. That was more or less a few years after the liberalization started for India. We were just beginning to get open. That was around the time we had Nifty, which was the Indian Bourse indicator, and a relatively young Nifty in those days. I was looking at the list of companies that stacked up into that top 50 list of India. And then when you zoom into time and take, let's say, approximately about 20 years, slightly less than 20 years since then, 2012 was the first stop. I found that 30 out of those 50 companies actually slipped out of the Nifty. And zooming further down another 10 years, which is currently to 2022, another 5 companies slipped out of the top list of 1995. So 1995 to now, in Indian context, just 15 companies out of 50 are left behind in that list. I thought this was a very compelling data. Established companies, something is happening there. So obviously 35 new companies not in that list have emerged from somewhere, and they've done something far more innovative, far more entrepreneurial to do value creation. So that's one sort of interesting data I thought I'd share with you. The other interesting data I want to place on the table, this kind of value creation that happened in the last several years, and when you compare it, you gave the NASDAQ or the Fortune data, it seems to suggest that probably the innovation happening in India is still better, because we still have 15 companies and almost nothing is left out of that list. I think one has to view the context of the last 20-25 years where we were just opening up. So the disruptive forces were relatively less. Look at what's happened in the last 5-6 years. 2016, I was looking at the data of startups, which is another indicator of a bunch of companies who decided to do something because they found that there is an opportunity. That number was 471 startups as per the government data in 16. And by 2022, this number of 471 went to 70,000. So that means 70,000 entrepreneurs thought that there is a great opportunity for them to do something, do some value creation due to a combination of factors. Obviously, there's something getting missed out, something which was a market opportunity getting missed out, which logically should have been addressed by the larger companies, at least to some extent, to a large extent. And during the same period, we had just about 13 unicorns, 2016. Now we've crossed 100. So it's not just about startups coming, it's about real value creation and real growth coming. So I wouldn't be surprised for the next 7 to 10 years. A lot of these remaining 15 companies also will struggle to remain in that list because the disruptive forces have got unleashed at a much more forceful rate, where there's availability of capital, innovation, technology, all this is coming together in a more forceful manner. So if I were to, look at the whole sort of period, I think it would be fair to say that the Indian corporates really, established corporates really have somewhat disappointed in their quest for promoting entrepreneurship. Otherwise, a lot of them should have still.
So fair point, Vijay. I think, this really, the data really kind of brings it very clear to all of us. And I completely agree. The disruptive forces are just getting more, more depth. There's much more depth now. So absolutely. My next question, coming to you, Sanjeev, if I were to look at the Indian pharma industry, this has been a bit of an outlier, if we may say, compared to the other industries. It's a very shining example of very vibrant entrepreneurial activity. And during the pandemic in particular, it has been at the forefront of innovation and really has helped us all better deal with this very challenging situation, right? So just to know from you, Sanjeev, what has really worked for this industry? How can the other industries really draw from from some learnings from this industry?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Nilesh. Thank you for calling me here. Let me start by the context that, this is an industry which runs on high risk. Innovation in this industry is absolute high risk industry. It is either 0 or 100. You fail in R&D, then you fail. There's nothing more you can do. There is no recovery. There is no limited risk, nothing. So imagine big pharma putting in billions of dollars every year all over the world. If it doesn't work, it's all gone. And so that's the nature of the industry. And therefore, probably a little bit of risk taking is acceptable in this industry for that reason historically. I think if you take India into context, I think Indian industry thrived on actually not so much of real innovation, but as much as chemistry innovation, trying to just find a way to differently engage and copy the non-patented drugs to become a world-class industry. Benefit was that it is one of the few world-class industries India has. Now, what happened during the pandemic was the fact that most of us were forced into thinking, what can we do to contribute to mankind to save lives? And in that process, the risk-taking ability, which already existed in a way, but the decision-taking ability increased dramatically. So we had to take decisions immediately, and we had to ensure that we follow through them. So lot of companies tried to do something which probably they were not generally used to doing. And the R&D team became very enthused because the scientists' voice started getting heard. And for the first time, the scientists or the R&D head was sitting on the management table in decision making. So it changed the way Indian pharma industry started to look. And obviously, you see a lot of innovation that came through. Yeah, you see repurposing of drugs. You saw vaccines coming through in India. This week, you saw nasal vaccine getting approved. So there is a lot more that is happening now, which will propel or push Indian industry to become more innovative in the longer run. So that's the big mental shift that has happened. Secondly, on a technological shift is that people are ready to take different bets. And people have realized that the world is moving from chemistry to pure chemistry or small molecules to large molecules, as they call it. So biologics in simplistic terms. And biologics is the way to go. If you take the top 10 drugs of the world now, 8 are biologics. So it's clearly moving substantially towards the biologic world. And we should not miss the biotech revolution. So between startups, good companies, big companies, everywhere, we need to now start moving in the biotech world. And people are also taking bets which will work all over the world. They're not looking at India as a market, but traditionally Indian pharma looked at world as a market, and so it became easier for us. So I give you a very typical example. We are doing something which in fertility, in infertility, there are about 5 hormones. Now, to make recombinant version is the highest form of technology we can use, using cell lines and forget the technology around it. But if you use that technology, it is the last part of technology that you can use. If you take our big competitors globally, 3 big pharma companies, each one has 2 or 3 of them. By next year, we will be the only company in the world which will have all 5 recombinant versions. So these bets that people like us or any other company in India is starting to take is of a much higher nature. And this should augur well for the industry. I think the big lessons that we can talk about in our industry is that look, always build a world-class infrastructure. Try and look at world as a market. Make decisions faster. Also be very, very reactive to the market if things change, and have the risk appetite to invest money when required. So these are 4 or 5 things that probably our industry has done in the last few years, which should be a good lesson for us at least, and maybe it might help some other industry.
Indeed, Sanjeev. So in effect, what you're saying, Sanjeev, is there was a necessity to take quick decisions, and that actually kind of helped. I mean, ideas were always there; they were getting discussed, but the necessity really propelled the whole thing. So getting it to the market, the necessity to get it to the market, and I think. But Sanjeev, just a quick follow-up question before I go to Mahesh. Do you think this could also be a challenge? When things become better, and once again, we see that there may not be such a necessity in the market. Do you think we may go back to our old ways of working, or do you think this is here to stay?
Nilesh, I think this is always a risk, to get back into complacency or in comfort zones. But what we have seen now is that we are 1.5% of the global value and 8% of the global volume. That is getting understood by every company, that there is far more value that can be created and wealth can be created if we try and approach world as a market properly. And now the government is also moving to push companies with many kinds of schemes. So obviously there is an environment now. I believe going back into complacency looks less of a probability compared to maybe if you had asked me this question 10 years ago.
Great. Nice to hear, Sanjeev. This would be a very helpful perspective. Thanks. Next, coming to you, Mahesh. So Mahesh, you've personally been part of multiple greenfield ventures in varied domains, both as an independent entrepreneur as well as a professional or a corporate entrepreneur. Uh, some of the companies which you have looked at as Godrej, Chola, Apna Loan as an independent entrepreneur, and recently now in Kotak. Uh, what would you say have been the contributing factors that have enabled your success in this journey? Sorry, Mahesh, you're on mute.
So thanks, Nilesh. Thanks for having me here. And in fact, your thought-provoking questions made me go down memory lane. Honestly, I've never thought about all this till you asked me those questions. So when I go back and look at my journey from 94 onwards when I joined Chola, I think there's a pattern which seems to have helped me wade through the waters, if I have to say. I think the first and foremost thing in 94 when I joined Chola was I was just recruited and said, I was the first employee, go and start retail finance for us, right? So I think getting thrown into the deep end of waters probably is one of the best things that can happen to anybody because you have no choice but to learn to swim, I think the first and foremost factor which helped me maybe is develop an owner's mentality, right? I think it's very important whether we are in jobs or in on our own. I think never look at a role as a specific job, it's not that you're getting hired for a particular role or for a particular job. I've always looked at it as the business that you owned, right? For example, actually, way back in Chola, I remember one important statement which we internally asked ourselves. Those were the heydays of 94, 95. Some of you, Vijay at least would know because I'm sure he was in the industry at that point of time. It was mayhem in terms of the number of NBFCs mushrooming, And one fine morning, everything changed. When the CRB collapse happened, almost 90% of the NBFCs vanished, So we look back and say, what made us sustain that period and live through that period? I think the simple question we all used to ask is, if it's your money, will you lend? If it's your own money, will you lend? If I have 5 lakhs to be lent to a customer for a car loan, right? Would I lend my 5 lakhs to this customer, right? If the answer for it is no, then why would you wage your company's money on that, right? So I think that strong sense of ownership of saying that, look here, this is my money and I'm accountable, responsible. I take initiative, I take risk, I do everything as though this money belonged to me, right? I think that philosophy probably went through all my life, in all my assignments, because you always then look at it as something that you own, whether it's your own company or whether you're working with your shareholders' money, right? I think that sense of responsibility and ownership helps you take a lot of initiatives, helps you go beyond the role that has been defined for you, whether you're a sales head or a regional head or whatever role that was assigned to you, you looked at it very, very differently. That sense of ownership is probably the number one. Number two, I think culture fit. End of the day, whether you're on own or working with a promoter or shareholder, I think there is a value system which needs to be calibrated. That is very important. Very often what happens is people underestimate the value of this cultural fit and this value system. Thankfully, in my life, I've been extremely lucky to work with people with similar kind of value systems. And this is about day-to-day decision-making because are you looking at the short term? What is right? What is wrong? What is good? What is bad? That calibration should be there. In your enthusiasm to grow top line, you may take much more risk than what you would want to. As an individual, if you're not used to it, then might as well work in a company or with a set of shareholders who embrace that kind of thought. Otherwise, there is a mismatch and that can lead to a lot of accidents along the way. So I think that culture fit is extremely important. And thankfully, I said, I've been very lucky with all the organizations I have worked with. And when I ran my own company with my set of co-founders, I think the biggest thing is all of us were very culturally aligned, right? So I think that's the second bit, I would say. The third important thing is space to work. End of the day, if you own things and if you take a lot of initiatives, the organization and the place you work need to give you that space to go around and do things, to be able to collaborate, to go beyond your job description and get the job done. I think ability to put your ideas forth and get people to back them in terms of investments, etc. I think that space and that ability to go beyond your job, the organization should provide. The last, I think the most important thing is sustainability. I've always believed whatever you do needs to last beyond you. And I think working in Kotak, probably Uday says it more often than anybody else, right? So I think that not driven by short-term gains, to hold on to that short-term pain, even though there is a easier way to do it. But remember that, look here, that doesn't really add value in the long run. to restrain yourself from not doing the things which are easy to do, refrain from doing those things which can lead you in trouble. I think that's very important. So I think in this age of valuation and in this age of wanting to list on the urge, I think chasing valuation, to my mind, is not the right objective. Chase value creation, valuation will eventually come. If your objective is to say, okay, I'm chasing valuation, I think that leads to a lot of debris along the way. And the whole organization's culture, and today we are having a lot of horror stories in startups. While some startups have done brilliantly well, I think there are startups struggling there with similar things like sustainability and culture and value systems of the organizations. So I think sustainability is perhaps the most important thing as well. So if you ask me to sum up, I would say owner's mentality, culture fit, space to work, and always believe in sustainability and make sure that you treat it as a going concern, not a concern where you live and go away. And I think long tenured people in organizations normally tend to understand this better. So I think at Kotak, again, I've spent 17 years here. Most of the senior management in Kotak. In fact, when I finished 10 years, I said, hey, I finished my management training period in Kotak. Everybody is 20, 25 years. So I think that long tenure also adds a lot of responsibility and accountability. That, for instance, I left Kotak General Insurance about a year back. I'm sure at any point of time, I'll still be evaluated on how that company is performing, because I set it up from scratch and set the value system and set the risk-taking culture, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's where long-term perspectives and sustainability helps.
Thank you, Mahesh. That was very, very good. I think very well articulated the 4 points that you mentioned. And I think the point that you mentioned about the growing concern, that's if everybody keeps that in mind, I think it really will help a lot of the corporates. Yeah, indeed. Rishi, if I can come to you next. So Fino has had an evolutionary journey since its inception 15 years ago, right? From a fintech to today also a payments bank. And as a payments bank for the last 5 years, you have seen multiple changes in market forces and literally have had to innovate on the fly. How would you describe the entrepreneurial culture, for a company which has been set 15 years ago, you've hardly had time to stabilize, to get into a BAU kind of situation. So how would you describe the entrepreneurial culture? Do you carry it from where you started it from, or is it a little different? So
thank you. Thank you, Nilesh, and good afternoon to everybody. See, the culture of our organization comes from the backgrounds we all have come back. So some of us have spent time outside before we started this own company. And when Fino was formed 16 years back, at the time of formation itself, a lot of people discounted that how can financial inclusion, banking outside the box, banking in your pocket and banking in rural India will really work. So a lot of discounting, a lot of challenges. People said you are destined to fail. And then we got the payments bank license in 2015, 2017. It was like baptism by fire, because then again, when 11 licenses were issued, 4 of them surrendered on day 1. So again, we were asked that how will a payments bank really work? And in between, I think 1 or 2 more surrendered. Now there are 4 out of 11 who are really doing some job. So it's been a very difficult period, especially for companies like ours, who have to start a different model which has been in the last 60, 70 years, has been considered a very difficult model to make money at the grassroots level, to really make rural work. And Fino has been at it for the last 16 years or so. And it's been a very difficult journey since then. So from an entrepreneurial culture, I think one thing which is really stands out for us and for my team is a never say die attitude. And come what may, we will try to work hard. We will try to figure out solutions. We will try to, our model, Nilesh, if you know, payments bank is a non-lending kind of a model. So a lot of times we are even discounted whether we are a bank or not. A lot of people, they say we are a payment company, so to say. But still we are a regulated entity and we have to follow all the regulations of Reserve Bank of India. We have to follow the cost of compliance. So we are actually fighting the war with the non-regulated entities with all the costs and the challenges which come in a regulated business. So the never say die attitude of the team, of the leadership team in Fino and our people has been one of the standing point, especially in this 15, 16 years of our journey. Secondly, we as a team, and it comes from our backgrounds, which is there. Also, we don't believe in too much of creating hype. We have always been kind of a people who have not created too much of hype, but have been working on the model, have been working on doing the things right, and getting the model right, rather than creating a lot of hype and spending a lot of money in marketing blitz and everything else. So the humility which is there inside the company, and the respect for all the co-workers which is there, and the fact that we are fighting a very difficult war amongst all the fintechs and the people with loads and loads of money. Startups these days raise money in hundreds and $200s, and Vijay really helps them raise a lot of money. But having said that, so it's a lot of competition, so to say. So we believe the fact that for us, getting the right model is something which is very critical. And the culture in the company is also built around the fact that keep your heads down and feet on the ground, and keep on working and listen to the customer. Rather than a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach really works for us, because we cater to somewhere around 600-700 million customers who are financially not excluded, so to say, but don't get the kind of service. We service about 25 million customers every month. So we listen to them, and the model per se, like when we started the payments bank, we could have gone the digital way and burned hundreds of millions of dollars on that, or we could have gone the traditional bank way of sending up big branches and doing that. But what we did, we set up a very low cost model through merchants, and now we have more than 1 million merchants who work for us on the ground. So we not only create jobs for them and increase their livelihoods, but we are also serving the customer right at the doorstep. So this kind of innovation which we have brought in to the company, and the products also, I'll give you one example. We have a product called Cash Bazaar. So in a small town, there are people who need money, and then there are people who have surplus money. So they come to the bank and deposit and take out the money from the bank. So our merchants are now enabled to collect money from companies, and there are about 150 companies where we have partnerships. And those come and deposit money with us, and then there are millions of people who want cash. So within the same geography, the merchant is making money on both sides. So that kind of innovation and that kind of, I would say, businesses which we have built is really helping us in the long run. But from an entrepreneurial culture point of view, I think getting a young team, giving them a lot of independence and creativity is something which and the open door policy which we follow in the company really makes us stand out. And now Fino is also kind of create a brand for itself, especially in our market segment. And a lot of work has actually gone into it. Even our brand ambassador is a very humble, very simple guy. So from that point of view, the entire DNA of a company is surrounded by the fact that we need to be focused on our work rather than creating a lot of hype and unnecessary marketing blitz, so to say.
Great, Rishi, and thanks for that. I think the key things that we really pick up from this is, from a culture point of view, a never say die attitude, a sense of humility, listening to the customer, open door policy, and creativity. So thanks, Rishi. My next question to Lingaraju. So Lingaraju, Kyndryl, is a recent and a very promising spin-off of IBM. And, while we are talking about India, but, it'll be great to learn from our global peers as well. And, this spin-off really demonstrates how well IBM continues to reinvent itself continually, right? So my question is, do such spin-offs help unlock entrepreneurial potential within large organizations? And, what has been Kyndryl and IBM's experience in this regard?
Hey, hello, Rishi. Thank you for having me here on this prestigious panel, and a big warm hello to all my panelists out here. Yes, I think in this whole journey of corporate entrepreneurship, right, when we look back at how IBM has constantly changed itself over the last 100 plus years, this recent spin-off of Kyndryl, the services division of IBM, into a separate company, I think sort of addresses that specific area. The primary frame of reference is the changing tech landscape, right? and that landscape changes, used to change every decade earlier, but now changes every 4 or 5 years. And with that context of the changing landscape, as a company wants to reinvent itself, you start looking at your various businesses and say, what's the right space? Is this able to compete in the right environment? And what does it take for it to be a leader in its own space? With that premise as such, the services division of IBM, which was what was the Global Technology Services or GTS earlier, was spun out as a separate company. It's about a year ago. That's September last year we spun out, and it's been a 1 year run. So the way this whole thing was set up was that the business division got spun out as an independent company so that it could operate in its own market dynamics, deal with its own competitive landscape, but more importantly, in a way, unlock its value. So, for example, being a division of IBM, the addressable market was about $200 billion. But once it came out from being a business division to independent company, through the sheer opportunity of being able to partner with other technology players, the ability to bring in new capabilities and new solutions to the market, it's now addressing a $530 billion market opportunity. So in a way, one unlocking of value is the addressable market itself changes, and it sort of changes as to who you are and what you want to be in the changing landscape. So that's one area. The second area is also about optimizing the business and setting it up for success in its own domain, which sort of brings me to the key area of culture. From being a technology company to a services company, each has a different way of operating. A technology company operates primarily on a model of innovation at the center and distribution at the edge. So basically you innovate at one place and then every other operation along the country becomes a distribution outpost. Whereas for a services company, your innovation actually happens at the edge, which is where you're serving customers, and hence the way you deal with situations and empowering employees at the edge becomes a very key factor. So to that becomes a culture journey. So the culture shift from who we were and what we were doing to now becoming a service-centric, employee-enabled organization and building a culture around it, which is being restless and empathetic and devoted to customers while working internally in a flat, fast, and focused manner. As a culture journey became a second big tenet of how clients see us. And at the core of it comes the fact that your employees start feeling a lot more empowered. They really make decisions which are right in the interest of clients, as well as what's right for them. And that helps them to show up differently. And that has a very cascading impact. So as an outcome of all of this, it's still a long way to go. But we can see a lot of green shoots. As we started off as a $19 billion company globally with presence in about 90 countries and 90,000 employees, India becomes a very key element for us because our biggest talent base, 1/3 of our talent base is in India, which is not only working with clients here, but also supporting our global areas. And what it's now allowed is that, as you heard from all my fellow panelists, India is an opportunity market where it does push you to the limits of innovation around the opportunities it gives you, whether it's on the scale size or whether it's on the limitations of population, space, and everything else. So as an outcome of which, we've been able to bring out some very innovative solutions which were catering to the Indian market, but now it's become hardened enough. Now it goes to global scale. So technically, it's like a make in India for the world is what the tech platform has now moved to. So a combination of these three things, which is where I brought the entrepreneurial thread across, spinning out as a venture by a set of people and now giving it a global landscape so that it has an opportunity market that doubles. Second is the make in India, make it for the world or made for the world kind of a thing basically takes innovation from India to the rest of the globe because of the tech talent that's clearly available here. And underpowering all of that is the culture journey from who you are and what you want to be, which is built around innovation at the edge, right? I think these are three tenets that have really been the forefront of this, in a way, calling it as the corporate entrepreneurship, and how the whole things have come together, Rishi.
Great, Lingaraj. So thanks for that, and good to know about this journey. And I think we've seen it's been 1 year, and I'm sure it's a very promising journey ahead for Kindred.
Absolutely.
So, Vijay, so I'll come back to you, and one of my favorite questions. Having been an ICICI employee earlier, So, I've always revered this company, and it's been a great example of, continual innovation, right? And innovation, whether it is incremental, whether it's evolutionary, ICICI has always been there. In many ways, it really has defined the market, right? What are the learnings that one can draw from the entrepreneurial success of this very esteemed organization?
Yeah, I'm sure, if you ask this question to different people from ICICI, you will get different answers. So what probably, I will say is my take on it, the way I perceive things. But certainly I do believe, having, being a part of ICICI group, it's a organization that has really taught us a lot. And I think entrepreneurship within an organization, or entrepreneurship as it's called, is something that became a part of our DNA at a very early age. Something that some of my fellow panelists said when he spoke about his Chola example. I could relate to almost everything that the fellow panelists said. So I really don't know if there's a set formula or guideline to create entrepreneurship within a setup. But certainly some of these elements, I think, would be a common thread across. What I really seen, at least my take on ICICI, I think the first and foremost thing that I've seen is that there needs to be, and there has been, a leadership sponsorship. I think that restlessness of the leader, the ownership of the leader as literally like not as a manager, but as a leader owner of the setup, I think to my mind is a starting point. And I've seen that within the system. What is very important and nuanced to that element is oftentimes we don't necessarily have the environment that, the pharma industry example Sanjeev gave, that, you have a gun on the head, almost like a Tina factor. You have to take a decision and then you are driven to make these moves. Oftentimes, you may be already large, you may be already big, but you are actually going to be seeing changes which could be very far-reaching, disruptive for your industry. And it's often only when the tide has passed that you realize it. So I think not just having this restlessness at leadership, ownership at leadership, but having the humility simultaneously to be able to see this and recognize that this force could actually disrupt my life, my business, my company. And therefore I have to accept it and do something about it. I think that's another element that I've seen in the leadership, that humility coupled with that restlessness and the desire to innovate and change. It's a very nuanced sort of an angle that I thought is very important. Thereafter, obviously, it is a lot of culture building that needs to go about it, because you have to cultivate, you have to communicate clarity, and then you have to actually get your entire team to behave. Innovation starts from top, or rather, entrepreneurship expectation starts from top, but the behavior has to be done by the team members. So how do you really set a motion, a culture that really makes people behave in a manner that promotes entrepreneurship within a setup? And that is where a lot of, I would say, reward, recognition mechanisms need to be put in place again and again and again. And communication has to be again and again. I mean, to the point for at least a leader, it is like boring to say that again, but that's a that one can happen when you keep repeating the same story again and again, so that it becomes totally ingrained in the setup. The other element that I've seen is, which is probably ingrained, that has helped in creating this innovation and entrepreneurship combination, has been bringing about diversity. It's very important to, I think, also bring an element of a bunch of people who are not necessarily like you, and they don't necessarily think like you. I remember, for instance, in our context, we brought people who are non-bankers into banking, and the way they think, the way they sort of perspectives they brought, and they some of them have done pretty well. Not all of them succeed, but I think you have to be able to have that risk-taking or that appetite for taking something which is very different from how you think. It could be a technology guy, it could be a a sales and marketing guy or a supply chain guy who's actually worked in an industry and not in really banking, because the perspectives and the angles that he brings or she brings is quite different. The other element which I think is very important is the ability for your organization to attract talent. Again, it doesn't happen just by a desire. You have to put in place mechanisms. You have to recognize, reward, and handsomely reward people. I think some of the programs that were brought out in the past, the employee stock option program, and many organizations have done that, really to promote this kind of ability to attract talent from the market and retain high quality talent. Then there is this element of investment of capital. It's not just about all of this, but the leadership has to be committed to investing capital, investing technology, investing time. I think some of these elements are pretty important in being able to generate entrepreneurship. And I've observed some of these threads across over the last several years. And lastly, it's not always that you're going to win. There are times when you'll actually fail, and the leadership will probably have to bite the dust, so to speak, cut the loss, and sometimes even not sometimes. Actually, you'll have to also, in a way, celebrate failure and not make it a kind of a situation. Of course, learn out of it for sure. It's important to learn out of failures, but let it not demoralize the setup or the system, and so that it kills risk-taking capability. So again, that's a fine nuance that one needs to take. You have to learn out of failures. You can't let it pass. Terrible to have a repeat of the same reason causing a problem again. But certainly, it's okay to fail. I think these elements is what I've observed in the context of ICICI.
True, Vijay. Just a very quick follow-up question. One of the other things which I think we all have noticed about ICICI is the ability to also reinvent time and again. Would you like to just quickly take a minute on that and give your perspective?
I've spent almost 30 years with the group. And even though I'm 30 years into the system, perhaps we are today, if I have to look at ICICI, we may be a 5-year young organization, despite being being incorporated way back in 1955. Because every few years we have completely, what I say, in a way, destroyed yourself and created a new avatar of yourself. And that is why I'm saying that humility is important. You have to recognize that, okay, what you have done, what you have created, worked in the context in which you created, market is changing, environment is changing, opportunities are emerging, and you have to let go certain elements of what you have created, carry the good elements of what worked for you, and then become a new version of yourself. I think that is is something that is again very ingrained as a culture within the ICICI group. And I've seen it time and again. I mean, I'll go back into time. In the early part of 1995, the Nifty example that I was giving, at that point in time, we were not even ICICI Bank then. It was ICICI Limited, DFI, Development Financial Institution. It was only in the late 90s that we formed. We actually became a universal bank after that. A bunch of new insurance companies were spawned, and then subsequently we got into retail in the early part of 2000 from something which was always seen as an industrial credit investment corporation of India, a hardcore project finance, industrial lending organization. So I've seen that every few years, as the opportunity emerged, as the environment offered a new, I would say, a context, we recognize that it's time to change and morph to be there. And I think even today that continues. Even today we are a work in process organization.
Great. Thanks, Vijay. That's some very pertinent lessons. Thank you for sharing that. Next, coming to you, Mahesh. Again, I will draw from your own personal experience. Having been an independent entrepreneur, how has it helped? What we see in the industry, there are clearly people who have probably been purely independent entrepreneurs. There are some who are only professional entrepreneurs. or corporate entrepreneurs, but you've got the benefit of both. So how do you think your being an independent entrepreneur has helped Kotak with your abilities?
Well, help Kotak, I think you should ask other people at Kotak, how it has helped them. I can probably share as to how I look at it. I think, what is entrepreneurship all about? It's a question of being in a restless state of mind where you're operating like an insurgent, trying to challenge something which is around you, which you're not happy with, right? It comes with some kind of restlessness where you feel, no, I think we can do it better, or there can be a different way of doing it. No, I think that inherent ability to challenge the status quo and operate like an insurgent always, I think has helped me, because you always question, even though you may be an incumbent. For instance, Kotak Life is a 20-year-old company. So technically we're an incumbent, right? But how do I really make the organization think like an insurgent before somebody else comes and hijacks our model? How do we really reinvent ourselves? No? I think the ability to challenge status quo and ability to think like an insurgent always is something that one needs to do, whether you are in an entrepreneurial position or a entrepreneurial, as you have defined it, position. I think the second thing is to ability to look at things holistically. I think thankfully all of us started corporate life in an era where our industries were getting formed. The NBFC and the lending industry, retail lending industry was just getting about formed in 94. So thankfully we all had jobs which were very holistic. I remember in 95, 96, I used to do credit, I used to do collection, I used to do sales, I used to handle seizures, I used to handle dispose of vehicles, go to RTO, file for sales tax, service tax, whatever. So I think at a very early age in life, we were able to understand the business very holistically. I think that's something we need to probably more and more propagate at work today. We need to identify a bunch of talented people and make sure by the time they hit their 35, 40, they've been through almost all aspects of the business. Because that holistic ability helps you appreciate your colleague, appreciate different viewpoints, and helps you to collaborate very easily. The third I would say is entrepreneurship is all about getting your hands dirty. I remember a time when we were expanding very fast and we had to have a new office and we didn't have furniture for the new office. I spoke to one of the manufacturing companies. They said 6 months delivery. I think I walked into Fort or something and caught hold of an old Parsi gentleman and actually ordered furniture on rent, where we pay 10 rupees per chair per month, 50 rupees per table, something like that. I hauled it in a truck and came back and put it in the office and said, come on, we have the basic furniture, let's start. I think it's about getting your hands dirty and willing to do anything that is required to get the job done, not look at hierarchy. So if you have to be a janitor, so be it on a given day. I think entrepreneurship teaches you the ability to get your hands dirty and have no qualms about what you're doing. As long as you're contributing and it's important, get the job done. Doesn't matter who has to do it. I think the next is working with constraints. As an entrepreneur, always you're working with constraints. Constraint can be man, machine, money, resources, whatever. I think that spirit, when you apply to the organizational context, sometimes I think we waste resources, right? Large organizations, sometimes you end up wasting a lot of resources. So if you put yourself continuously in that constraint of saying, look here, let me always, if I need 5 rupees, let me do the job with 3 rupees, right? That mentality, if you try to sink it in, I think your ability to deliver far better efficiency and value will be there. So be a little bit parsimonious. As I said, treat it like your own money, Like if I can probably get a better deal on a economy class ticket, why waste on a business class ticket, right? So something like that I'm talking about, Then the last one is ability to go to the brink and come back. I think that I learned as an entrepreneur. I think we raised capital across those 5 years. I was way ahead of our time. 2000, I'm talking about 2000, 2005, when I started Apna Loan and sold it in 2005. I think we went to the brink and came back a couple of times, But there was strong conviction and belief that, look here, we'll make it happen, So the ability to go through ups and downs builds that resilience in you, saying that, look here, the can-do attitude and ability to dig your leg deep and say, okay, I'm going to stay there and face the consequences of whatever is happening. And this too shall pass, The tough times will pass. I think the final thing, in a way, Vijay spoke about it, but I think ability to balance conviction and arrogance, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you're very possessed about your idea, right? You think that's the best idea. It's like every Bollywood director thinking that he's making the best picture on earth, right? And then the results come out something else, right? So I think that obsession that what you're doing is right has to be balanced. That conviction is required, otherwise you can't perform. You have to have that attitude that, look here, I believe in what I do. But that ability to balance it out so that too much of conviction can land you in arrogance, not wanting to listen to people. But balancing that conviction with humility to understand where you can go wrong, I think is important. So if you ask me, these are the 5, 6 things which along the way I've picked up. And I must say, I never thought about all these things, Nilesh, since you asked me this question. So I think it's more about connecting the dots. But I think these are the things probably which are today relevant in any job that you do, whether an entrepreneur job or a entrepreneurial job.
Well said, Mahesh. Thanks. That was very interesting. And in fact, I think the last point you mentioned about balancing conviction and arrogance really is what probably is the difference between success and failure for a lot of entrepreneurs, right? So thanks, Mahesh. Coming to you, Sanjeev, again, in the pharma industry in particular, we have seen platforms play a very big role, and this again is one of those best practices of the pharma sector, which I think a lot of other sectors can really benefit from. But it's still a very vague idea. Sometimes it's not very well established. Difficult for other industries to imagine in a way. But given the fact that pharma has actually made platforms workable, and it's really helped the speed to market. Just a perspective from your side, Sanjeev. If you can just explain this concept a little bit of how the pharma sector has dealt with it. How has it helped your company, BSV, and overall the pharma sector in general?
Sure, Nilesh. But before I say anything, I like what a line that Vijay said, that leaders have to be restless. I think that's a very, very. Also, I think another point that he mentioned about ICICI, I must say that about 18, 19 years ago, a couple of us trying to pioneer something in the industry of trying to create an exchange between distributors and companies as a payment exchange, which was quite an idea at that time to get distributors away from all these hundis and private lenders. I think the first bank we thought of was probably saying that maybe ICICI might be innovative enough to look at this idea. So I think what he mentioned, you could think through that, why they were innovative in that sense. Yeah. So, Nilesh, there are two ways to reply this. One in a very technical way, but let me try and do this in a very simplistic way. One which probably is so recent that everybody will realize what I'm talking about. And second, a little more complex, but will tell you how platforms help deal with unmet medical conditions and diseases which have been a problem over a longer period of time, and how industry deals with it as platforms. So the latest example that people have seen is, I think many of us would have tried to take mRNA vaccine. And the BioNTech vaccine which Pfizer sold was an mRNA platform, or the Moderna vaccine, which is an mRNA platform. And now you see Moderna suing Pfizer for breaching patents. So basically, what is this platform thing all about? So there are different kinds of vaccines that have been, there have been vector vaccines, inactivated virus, activated virus. There are different kinds, but this trying to skin the virus and saying only I will take the messenger RNA out of it, and saying I will create a spike protein and create an antibody against it. So that is a very, very simplistic way of saying it. And therefore, this mRNA platform was created. Now that platform has been created for the last 10 years, but got to use during the pandemic. And you could quickly ramp up and say that, okay, I can build a vaccine for COVID. But now that the platform is tested and doing well, you will very soon find mRNA vaccines for dengue, for malaria, for chikungunya, for some other diseases. TB will be tried. You suddenly find all these diseases being tackled through the same platform, because the ideation is what it is. And the ideation has changed the way the industry has looked at research. Is basically because now we know that if we get to the root of RNA or a DNA of the disease, then you can manage to re-engineer it very quickly and create a response to it. So this is how platform development happens. I'll give you another example which will tell you. Let me first say this, and then let me tell you why it is so. By 2030 or another 10 years, let's say, most of the cancers will be treated reasonably. And most cancers will have a reasonable life expectancy on treatment. Now, I'm making a big statement, but probably it is in the realm of reality now. Already you're seeing lung cancer until 5 years ago had a probability of maybe 1.5 to 2 years of survival, has gone to 5 to 7 years. So things are happening. And there are different reasons for it. There is an immune oncology platform that has been created, immunology platform for oncology. There is CAR-T. Then there are the old chemotherapy agents. Now, what have we learned through this to say this, that this could happen, is that, in 1995, if you had HIV, you had to take 28 pills a day and your survival was low. Today, you can take one triple combination pill and you can take it once a day and your life expectancy is the same as a person who doesn't have HIV. So imagine what has happened. And that's because when, as a platform, what got created was that if this is the disease, then if this is the energy cell of the disease, how do we deal with it at different angles and find it to create inroads in different ways on the same energy of the energy cell. Now, using different methods and combining them to treat that helped us achieve what we achieved in HIV. Same lessons as a platform we are learning for oncology. And now we are dealing with oncology by saying we will get in predictive oncology by trying to bring in different agents of different types that we are researching and try to combine them and say that which might work for which patient. So it will even become very patient specific and therefore might help us do predictive oncology and treat the patients in a much better way. So I gave you two maybe slightly scientific examples, but what it tells us is that when you have to tackle diseases, either you can individually research them in detail, or you could take an approach by saying, if I find a technology platform which can help us try and deal with the base issues and therefore can be utilized in a multiple disease platforms, then I might be in a much better position to solve a lot of things. So that's what is happening as a platform thing. So if you look at, yeah, so if you look at from the point of view of a entrepreneurial activity or business, people are wanting to say, let me create a platform.
No, that's one, Sanjeev, and the fact that the platform will help the ideas come to the market much quicker. I think that's really.
And the speed to market is very high because then I don't have to do the basic part again because that is well established. Regulators have approved it. Regulators are very happy with the story, so there's nothing much to do there. So it's very quick.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sanjeev.
Try and fill it. It's a good conversation, and probably may I invite Vijay to share your parting thoughts for the participants. How do we move forward as this decade or probably 2 decades is India's decade, I would say. And how do you look the future of businesses getting from here on to the decade, and now we are the 5th largest, and how do we move forward from here on? So Nilesh is back. But Vijay, question to you.
Yeah, I think on an overall basis, we are extremely optimistic about the next several years for the country. And I think this is across different areas of business, be it domain of finance, which I represent, pharma that Sanjeev was just talking about, some of the areas of inclusion that Rishi represents, and of course services that comes from the other Lingaraj. So I personally feel that it's a very widespread sort of arena that's available for propelling us for growth. It is a combination of, and this feeling of the opportunity is increasingly gaining grounds, conviction, not just amongst internal investors within the country, but a very strong momentum is visible amongst international investors. We are also interestingly seeing that the policy framework, which is important to facilitate harnessing the opportunity here, is getting a lot more proactive. Following COVID, we've seen such agile responses from authorities which are in positions of power, be it the regulatory authorities, be it the government, be it the policy makers, the bureaucracy. I think all of them have moved in an unprecedented and agile fashion. And I think that gives, that in a way has front-loaded, if at all, the sort of momentum that would have probably played out in a little longer time. So I think the behavior shifts that we are observing because of COVID-related changes seems to have actually propelled and accelerated the momentum and opportunity. I think these traits, these takeaways, the positive takeaways from behavior shifts should continue. The agility of responses from the policymakers certainly is one of the areas that we look for. And we find that policymakers, regulators, government, they engage very, very extensively with businesses to understand practical issues, dealing with them, because that's a very important ingredient in harnessing the opportunity. And they are very reasonable in formulating policy framework. Having said that, I think there are some fundamental areas that need to be addressed to realize the full potential. One clearly is the manufacturing setup. I think a lot of momentum and excitement seems to have come with the PLI program of the government, and that is now being spoken about getting far more broad-based than where it is today. I think these are great signs, and I think overall there is a huge amount of optimism about the future. We have to continue to identify these gaps which are there, manufacturing, labor, which have been done. I think today a lot of areas that need to be addressed are getting surfaced, and reasonably agile actions compared to the past are getting taken. So I think overall we remain optimistic. And this, again, we spoke about restlessness earlier on, this restlessness within the system to keep surfacing these issues and addressing them is important as we move forward.
Thank you, Vijay, for answering the question in detail. Over to you, Nilesh.
Yeah, thanks. So, Lingaraju, I think coming back to you, so central to the idea of entrepreneurship, what I was saying was the ability for ideas to flow seamlessly across functions and hierarchy. What has been your experience within Kyndryl for getting this right?
I think listening to all the fellow speakers, the one idea that really struck me, what Mahesh said, is insurgency in the incumbency, right? That sort of figures out who we were and what we do. Coming from a 100-year-old company, the incumbency was sort of taken for granted because you had a fair incumbency. But then how do you, as you get out from there and start at the base, how do you bring the insurgent mindset? I think borrowing on what Mahesh said, I think that's been our journey. Having said that, the one thing that we did as soon as we got out from IBM into a separate company was how do you bring the entire 90,000 people to align to what we want to be and who we want to be, and more importantly, get everyone's thinking around it. So we set up a platform for a 72-hour basis where we had all the employees jamming together, putting their ideas across. We called it as a culture jam, where we put some few tracks around it, around brand identity, how we want to work between ourselves, how do we come out in front of customers, what process we got to follow, what we want to do with, what you want to, and sort of lay it out in a very transparent manner. And that through the platform, we had participation from almost everyone. And that gave us a lot of distilled thoughts and ideas of setting out our business objectives and, more importantly, our culture objectives. And through that, we identified our 6 culture tenets of being restless, empathetic, and devoted, and fast, flat, and focused. So technology does give you that platform and enables you to cut across hierarchy and bring in thoughts and ideas from everyone as we do. So that's one frame. And the second frame is as the current world that we are in, and as Vijay pointed out, right, it's very clearly that it's a very open world. You don't have to have all the solutions within your shop. There's stuff people are good at outside. You can bring that in through a outside and innovation. And that's where you leverage talent from outside. You be more open. You bring in ideas from outside, and technology like cloud and others does provide you that platform. So combination of these two is what I would say that in a way has brought in a lot more accelerated view to innovation inside or outside, and as well as making it a lot more participative, cutting across hierarchy, Rishi.
Thanks, Niraj. So last question, Rishi, I think very important, take on the technology side of things. We if you look at fintech companies like yourselves, you have demonstrated how technology, completely democratizes the entire entrepreneurship, setup, right? And how it can be leveraged, for companies to be more nimble, target underserved markets. So how has Fino's experience been in internalizing this technology into your business operations? Because you need to get to the market very quickly. So how have you been able to do this in the right way?
So Nilesh, actually Fino started as a technology company way back in 2006. Our DNA was to be a technology company. Somewhere over the years, we morphed into a services come a technology company. So technology has been very much part of our entire DNA, so to say. It's not a conversation which we do on a quarterly basis. It's a conversation we do on a daily basis. I think the way we have been able to make banking possible at the remotest part of the country is also because of technology. If I look at the speed, the scale, and the security, which are the three important assets from a technology point of view or any solution point of view, I think the entire opportunity which got created in the last 5-7 years, which is called the Jam Trinity, Jandan, Aadhaar, Mobile, and the fact that the NPCI rails have come up in the last few years on IMPS, UPI. Actually, that kind of catapulted the entire conversation around financial inclusion becoming a viable economical model, so to say. So technology is not a conversation which we do only in the boardrooms and we have an IT strategy. It is like a part of our DNA. It's part of our daily conversation. So what we did was that when we were looking at a customer, we decided that the front ends or the customer facing technology solutions or the digital solutions will have to be developed internally in the company, both from the speed of development as well as the focus and the control which we can have on such kind of developments which we do. I think that helped us quite a bit. And over the last 15-16 years, because we did a lot of national level programs around RSBY, smart card solutions, direct benefit transfers, our ability to make technology possible at the ground. See, it's good to have network and it's good to have a lot of things. And technology can work in a laboratory, but we're making technology work on the ground in a far off place where networks are not there, the power is not available, and you have all kinds of issues. So that is something which we have developed over the last 15-16 years. So technology is something which we do day in and day out, and our ability to have executed large scale technology projects over the last 15-16 years made us believe this. Through technology, we can make all this possible, making banking available to the remotest part. And I would say somewhere the regulator, as well as the technology rails which got built by the government of India really helped us to make this dream possible.
Great, Rishi. And I think these are great learnings from the kind of setups that you have and the way you've used technology, the way that, other sectors can also really draw on.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Great. These were great insights, great ideas. Thank you to this panel. It has been very engaging. So thank you once again, and over to you, Alka.
Thank you, Nilesh, for taking us through such an enlightening session. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to such a fantastic discussion. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session on Leadership Unmasked, Driving Entrepreneurial Spirit, powered by Kyndryl. We look forward to seeing you all for our sessions in the future. This is Alka Kaur signing off. Have a nice day and stay safe.